Okay, let's talk about race. Random morning thoughts, but whatever. Not even thoughts, just sharing research for those who are interested. I get asked about race sometimes. Hope everyone's doing well today. Um, so physiognomy is it's a very interesting science, and I call it a science because, well, in my mind, it is. While in the minds of, let's say, your common and average researcher, it's a pseudoscience, just a ridiculous notion now, as proven by all kinds of different AI tools and, you know, facial programming and profiling systems that different types of governments use, and so on and so forth. Understanding the importance of physiognomy. Well, first, you can't underestimate the message it tells you. And the interesting part about physiognomy is this. When we look at human beings, we are very quickly driven to an understanding that most human beings throughout all of the races, they share a common archetypal. When it comes to temperament, I mean, they share a common archetypal design. So when you study the physiognomy of different cultures and races and nations and so on and so forth, the very first interesting thing you find, if you are an observant researcher, if you are if you are observant in your research, the very first thing you realize is that different types of archetypes are found universally throughout all of the races. Now, this is strange knowing this, right? So it almost gives you like an understanding of some sort of not a common ancestor. Ancestry is different than what we're talking about now, but it gives you an understanding of, well, how the human body as a genetic thing is constructed in the first place, what kind of design levers and values and so on and so forth. So basically what the math of creation even is. And we share this sort of math of creation, right? So if let's say blacks and whites or whatever different types of asiatic races, um most of us don't share genetic traits as much as we share archetypal traits in terms of like how humans are designed, right? But then the second interesting thing that you found out, because all of these archetypes with more or less variety can be found in a variety of, different races. The second interesting thing you find is that there are some things that are completely excluded from certain races, right? Or there are some features, imprinted genetic features that are incredibly rare or not amplified in certain races. So they're very dampened. So when you talk about the difference in race, we are far more different than we think we are. Far more different. Even though the archetypal system remains the same. So, for example, if you bought the very first introductory portion of my guide to physiognomy, you'll see that there is no specific, I don't know, like a page for like, oh, like, but how does this work for Asians? But how does this work for whites? How does this work for blacks? No, 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 no. There's no specific page for that. And that is by design, not my design, but by universal design. And now, once you understand that, then you'll also understand very quickly that some traits are very underrepresented in certain races and other traits are overrepresented. And you could be saying right now, "Well, Uncle Jack, just get to the point. Why are you teasing us with like this long ass disclaimer intro?" Well, I'm teasing you because I want you to understand the complexity of the topic. If I just told it to you in a single sentence, I would just do a tweet about it. What conversation allows for is for you to sit with the information that you're being given, and for you to really understand the the complexity and the depth of the subject. Now, what are the primary differentials between race as found historically and today? History, in a sense, and I've studied history for all my life. It was my first fascination. So when I say human history, the history of the human evolution. So starting from the evolution and then into the sort of like the less abstract ages, let's call it that, our most recent history. And if you're a student of history, you understand a very interesting thing about it is that 60 or 70% of it is absolute goislob, right? It's just a lie. Um, and it's a lie in an exaggerative sense, in a diminutive sense. So it's a lie in the sense of like whenever Caesar in his logs or journals, for example, calls that when at the siege of Alesia against Vercingetorix, they had besieged this barbarian king, right? A relief force of 500,000 Gallic warriors arrived to aid him. So when he says a 500,000 force arrived to aid him. But then again, if you look at the next record in there, it says four of his legions, mounted Roman soldiers, they rushed out of their encampment, which is like a was like a double siege. If you study that battle, they rushed out of this encampment and they destroyed the bulk of this incredible force, right? And sometimes you have those moments in history where you can say, "We're great, like 15,000 defenders held off 50,000 attackers," and so on and so forth. But largely, when you see something like that, you realize, well, this number was, of course, exaggerated, right? Because four legions worth of soldiers don't push back a half million force of soldiers, right? Um, so when you understand history in that context, it's sort of like full of exaggeration, and then there are some things that are wholly omitted from history, you realize that the historical sources don't, they can't be used and brought up as sort of like serious empirical evidence for whatever you're trying to prove, right? Now, on the basis of race, this is important because every conversation that you will ever hear nowadays on the basis of race will always go back to historical context. And well, if you tell me that the the anchor point of the most serious high level discussion in regards to race is a source of information that has proven time and time again to have no accuracy whatsoever. So it has more inaccuracy than accuracy, right? I would laugh you out of a room. And not enough people do this with history, by the way. They're given a cold, hard fact, and they'll just take the fact as, well, if it's there, it must have happened, you know? And this comes from the assumption that there's always some smarter someone. There's always some smarter someone sitting in some university closet, right? Sort of like the closeted researcher, and he's like digging through these old manuscripts and trying to come up with all of these new and improved and more accurate versions of whatever occurred in the past. You don't even remember what you yet ate yesterday. You understand where I'm going with this? So The greatest proof of racial bias or racial stereotypes and the accuracy of said stereotypes are the humans of the now, are the humans of today. So whatever is overrepresented today, right, lends itself to the historical context that is provided. So if you come here and you tell me, right, that there was an expert group of incredibly rich and militaristic orders of merchants somewhere in Venus, where they made a whole kingdom and then an empire out of it, right? Well, it must have been done and created by a peoples with a natural inclination towards merchantry and trade, right? This makes a lot of sense. Okay? So if you're telling me there was Carthage, an ancient empire, and the Carthaginian Empire was constructed by a ruling class of merchants and traders, then it must have been created or designed by a peoples with an inclination towards merchantry and trade. It's so simple, right? So where are those people now? Did they lose over a short span of, let's say, a few decades, their genetic juices and their intellectual and cognitive ability and the creative ability to create merchantry or trade? So it wasn't it wasn't a part of their imprint, but was more a part of their culture. Is that what you're telling me? If I raise my children in a culture of merchantry and trade, that they will suddenly become incredibly successful businessmen? We know that's not true. Now, they'll become moderately successful, right? A little bit more, but if there's no natural inclination, if there's no cultural and national and genetic sort of like imprint, very little of that will happen. And I'll give you a great example of this, okay? If we go to some village in Africa, right? And we start teaching them the significance of cryptocurrency mining, okay? And let's say we spend I don't know, like 10 years doing so. 5 years, 10 years doing so. The acquisition of the information provided, the efficacy of the information provided, and the efficacy of the learning will be so low that you will have achieved better results if you went into like a random fifth grade syllabus in the US or any other civilized sort of the country and put a year's worth of cryptocurrency mining education within the syllabus of fifth graders and sixth graders, right? And you would have more efficacy in terms of how much of the knowledge you give is ingrained within the minds of these children. And you would have, in a results based formula, you would have better results in a single year of schooling in like the fifth or sixth grade. And now, no one talks against this, right? So what's the difference between the fifth grade school experience and the African Aborigine village experience? What's the difference? Well, it's the pre existing level of intellectual complexity found in the denizens of wherever you're conducting this experiment. So if this example is so clear that it could not be any more clarity in this example makes it a comical thing, right? If we go into an ancient Siberian village somewhere in Russia, right? If we go to North Korea and conduct these same experiences, these same experiments, you will get the results you expect to get. So then, let's say when you look at physiognomy and you look at the physiognomic traits of the peoples that we mentioned and how these traits can then translate into their ability to conceptualize and abstractualize the information and the knowledge given, it becomes very close to not being a pseudoscience, does it? It becomes very, very close. If you take the features and the attributes of these people that we've talked about right now, and if you translate them, if one open minded could translate them and put it in onto a document and into a manuscript and translate the features found in these peoples and translate them to predictable patterns of learning and efficacy when it comes to receiving education and knowledge and wisdom and so on and so forth, suddenly you're looking at an 80-90% accuracy. Now you put that against the accuracy that we talked about, which is more often wrong than not in terms of historical context, right? And it's a joke. So what you want to teach yourself is you really have to like understand where the perception of even the idea of an expectation comes from. So let's say if you expect a certain experiment to do well in some remote African or Siberian village, right? You have not been watching, you have not been honest with yourself, as it would in, let's say, like this first world civilized society. Not even first world, just take a developing country between third world and first world with a high degree of IQ within the local populace. Your efficacy numbers are going to differ by like, I don't know, like probably 600, 700%. And whether we like it or not, these same elements and these same features are linked to race, innately and inherently, whether you like it or not. And now each race has a sort of curve, right? So it curves towards a certain ideal. And there are exceptions, of course, right? So you could have a child genius who is born in a remote African village, right? With improved and increased efficacy and intellectual performance. But within the grand picture, within the grand scheme of things, that is such an outlier that it can never, ever, ever make up for the lack of efficacy when it comes to learning for the rest of the tribe, let's say, right? Now, each race, this is also interesting, each race has um, an anchor point, a spiritual anchor point. Okay. And when this spiritual anchor point is removed from the equation of the daily living and lifestyles of these races don't do well. For example, if the African man channeled into his intuitive senses channeled into his spiritual senses, channeled into his oneness with the earth, right? Which is by far his most egregiously overrepresented feature and skill. That is his superpower, so to speak. If the African man is removed from the mud and muck of nature, from feeling the soil under his feet and the sand through his fingers, if he's removed from his natural source where he can excel, he underperforms. In any culture or society, immediately he underperforms. Because you are taking a specimen that is one of instinct and in strong intuition and primality, and you were putting him in a controlled environment, in an environment that feels like every room feels like a hospital. And then you're asking him to compete in this arena where he will inevitably, and I guarantee this, okay? He will inevitably feel underarmed, underpowered. You are creating a rebel in your system. And then you put the white man who in their superior idea of creativity and creative input in the external world, they're removed from faith and they will immediately self-destruct, because the spiritual anchor point for the white race is the creation of beauty as tributary piece to the fucking gods. So when you remove that which deserves tribute and worship in a spiritual sense from faith, from the white man, you remove his purpose and reason to create. When you look at those beautifully handcrafted statues from the Greek and Roman eras, ask just when you look at those beautiful monasteries and cathedrals with sacred geometry, ask yourself, what could have driven a man to chisel this fucking thing out of stone? So I'm not saying how they did it. I'm not talking about the achievement or the accomplishment of the art piece itself. I'm talking about why they did it. What could drive you today to go out into the jungle and devote 15 or 20 years of your life as the masters of old did in pursuit of crafting a single fucking statue of out of marble? There's only one answer to that. We all know what that answer is. So you disconnect a race that is so tied to divine imagery and to the pursuit of beauty in the form of God as a tributary piece to whatever God he worships, or the highest God. The rest of the gods are mediators in this matter, right? You remove that and you remove his purpose to create. You remove his purpose to create art. You remove his purpose to create family. You remove his purpose to reproduce. You remove his purpose to exist at all. That's how you activate the self-destructive programming. You take the black man and you remove his from his mojo, right? And you try to put him into an arena where he can't feel the soil beneath his feet anymore, right? When he can't talk to the plants and the animals and the sky gods and so on and so forth, you remove his spiritual anchor point. You create someone who is supposed to be, in a primal and animalistic sense, attached to the beating fucking heart of the earth itself. You remove that, and all that is left is the animalistic expression without the spiritual element. You remove the white man from his pursuit of God. You remove the faith that he has from the equation. He no longer has a purpose. All that is left is is lust and degenerate hedonistic expression, fleshly lust and pleasure, greed. All that's left. So the thing that is supposed to make these races into their highest forms and modalities of existence, if we remove that anchor point, you get a degenerate being. And most humans today, right? And this brings tears to my eyes, and I don't like teaching this, but most humans today are degenerate beings. About 70, 80% or so. And most of them are not even cognizant of the fact that they're degenerate beings. That's what makes this whole situation so sad. Because the ancestry, the collective ancestry of the human race as a whole, and the sub races, the substrata of races that exist, right, are so far removed from these spiritual anchor points that we're talking about that they no longer even identify with these ideas and concepts. They no longer identify with the poetry that their ancestors wrote. They find it cringe. And when you are born without an identity, you're just basically a fucking serial number in the grand soup of creation, right? You're a serial number, and all you do is you seek outside programming. That's all you do. So when you look at someone's physiognomy and they have a rich physiognomy in a certain in a certain sense, right? Oh, you would be great at this, you would be great at this, you would be great at that, blah 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 blah. And they're so imbalanced, right? They're so out of balance with what they're supposed to be doing. And they're trying to to forcefully fit in and shove themselves into their this idea that they've been sold of what kind of society they wish to live in, right? It's just sad. You take the man and you confuse him, and you put him in inside in an arena where you know he will underperform. And the moment he underperforms, he will feel violated and victimized. He will feel that the world is against him. The world doesn't want him because what he can offer to this world or this society in the forms of cultural enrichment does not exist. And deep down, he knows that. So everyone has a role to play, not because they're chained to this role, but because their physiognomic and genetic imprints tell us that that's where they find happiness and contentness. You put me in an office all day, I'll go insane. Okay? You take a German, any German, okay, with more than like 80, 90% of their genetic code being German, you put them in an office all day, they'll be happy and healthy as a fucking bird. because it's orderly. You understand? Oh, it's so orderly. It's like a calculator. Like every time they press a button, it gives them a dopamine rush. I fucking hate calculators, okay? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, when you understand where your creative juices flow, you want to flow towards that thing. You don't want to be going against it. So, can I say, let's say, for example, which I posted just now, right? I posted, if you knew what this Earth was, you would make sure the white race remained on it in increasing numbers as much as possible. But you don't know, in fact, what this Earth is. You don't even know who you are, so comments like this upset you. And you don't even know why. Every time I make a post about race, every time, especially about the white race, everyone wants to hate on the white man today. And I'm not even talking about the Caucasian wing of the white race at all, right? I'm talking about the wing that I don't belong to. I'm talking about the Europoid wing. Every time I post about it, someone gets you know, a little firecracker up their ass. You can feel it in the tone of the comment, right? You can feel the passive aggressive tone. You can feel that little bit of in whatever they say. And they say it is because it makes them feel insecure. But then when I say something like, well, like the black man, you put him on the earth, he feels the heartbeat of the earth, he can interface with Mother Nature because that's his natural inclination. They love hearing that. I don't have any friends or enemies in this fight. I'm telling you, I know that I need all of the races. I need all of the races, but I need them to shut the fuck up and go where they're the most content and happy. I need them to shut the fuck up in terms of telling me what they should be doing and listen to their own bodies and their godly imprints and go do what those imprints are telling them to do. Equality, equity. These are ideas that don't exist in nature. How can a god be equal to another god? Just tell me. The moment you make two divinities equal to one another, you attach them to one another, and both of them lose everything they are. Just as two gods cannot be compared, you cannot compare two human beings. It's retarded. It's stupid to expect as a species that we will ever achieve true equality and equity of race. It is a degraded and offensive way of looking at humanity as this canvas of nothing, right? And this is how the scumbags like to think about things. This is how scumbags, this is how bad parents love to think about their children. They're a blank slate. They're a 0 point canvas, and you can put whatever paint you want on the canvas, and all the canvas can do is submit to your will, to your degenerate will. At that, but the child has an imprint. The child has a mission. The child has a message. And all you're doing when you're throwing paint at the child is you're burying this imprint deeper and deeper down beneath the stupid, uninformed, uneducated programming that you're giving to the child. So you're giving the child an inheritance of trauma. Now, you pretend that you have a child of each race, right? You are the God of the earth. You're the father of Gaia, right? You're here on this earth. and you have a child of each race, and each of these children have their own imprint and their goal. If you study the Bible and the religious text and the interpretative measures that they take, the symbolic and allegorical measures that they take to speak to you in simple parables, that is done for a reason. The ruling religious and the priesthood class of the old and ancient peoples who were far wiser than we are now, outside of our whatever heebie jeebie technology that we have, they all used allegory and generalization to explain higher concepts. There was a reason why they did this. So when we say that Gaia is the Mother Earth and Father God, the creative seed that penetrated this unconscious realm with the conscious seed when it came into this fucking world, right? Into the womb of creation and sprouted the very first ideal of man and mankind when they had different children of different races, right? Which are all now even present here today. We don't speak about these races as a collective of a million individuals, even though that's what they are. We speak about these races as separate forces, separate aspects of the elemental whole, right? So when you simplify it for the child, they understand. You have Jacob, who is an intellectual maven, and you have John and Melissa and Augustine, who all have different amazing traits. But the moment you muddy the waters and put them all into the same one competition, right? There can only be one victor, and everyone loses. So when you have a race that has all the inherent traits and the genetic imprints to for us to think that this race is the caretaker, the guardian of of the natural habitat of this world, right? They need to be a little bit more connected, a little bit more private and intimate with the with the naturalities of nature. And then when you see another race who's highly industrious, a highly industrious race that can innovate and produce and create. These are the inherent genetic imprints that are present in the now, not in historical context, in the now, right now. Take me to China and I will show you how the best factories work. It's so simple, right? It's so fucking simple. And then you have another race that's incredibly proficient at interfacing with the creative act, the act of summoning up higher wisdom and knowledge and vision from the lands beyond this one, right? And you take that race and you put it into a fucking cubicle. What kind of world do you think you live in? What are you even doing for this world? What is your plan for this planet? If not assured self-destruction. Just tell me. Because you must be a degenerate leader or a corrupt leader, right? If you take these children that we talked about and you mix and match them and put them into arenas where they cannot possibly excel, that's how you create conflict. That's how conflict is created. In every in every single religious text or doctrine or mythos, every single one, there is the dissident child, the offspring that is born that betrays the values of the parents. And this offspring serves as the catalyst for change. This sort of offspring is born into families that require the changing of their ways, that require mm, the transmutation of their genetic challenges and adversities, right? And I don't want to hear it. I hate when people say, what you dislike in other people, you actually dislike about yourself. That's not how it works, dummy. It's not that simple. It's never that simple. Go read a fucking book on psychology before you say stupid shit like that. It sounds good when you put it into a quote and post it on Twitter. It sounds great. Where you can actually get away with being intellectually inept. But in any sort of classroom, like an intellectual discussion, that will never go. If you say something like that, it will never go. It won't even find footing, right? In any intellectual discussion or setting. Where the participants are actually intellectually respectable people. So you say something like, whatever you see in the other person is actually something that you don't like about yourself. Okay, this is a half truth, right? The truth is this: when something angers you in another person, so we're talking about the deviant offspring that you are a parent, you have an offspring that doesn't listen to you, they're deviant, they spit on your traditions, they spit on your ways. What they're teaching you is not that you hold some sort of inner hatred and that you hold also the desire to spit on your traditions. This is projecting. No, you don't. No, you don't. You're the preserver of said tradition. What the child is teaching you is that you need to find a way to address this. Because if something upset you in the external, in this sense, the deviant offspring, if something upsets you, then it is something that you haven't encountered before. So now you have to learn a new modality of thought, right? That allows you through the love and care that you have for your offspring because they came from you. You spawned this little devil. You spawned the little monster. They're your child, no one else's. They're not adopted. You made it. So now you have to find a new way to facilitate the existence of the child without doing without going through the process of mucking your buckets of paint onto them, like we talked about just a few minutes ago. And this excites great change within you as a parent. It challenges you. It changes you from what you thought you were into what you need to be in the moment to shore up the issue. But the problem is there are some things that the child is not allowed to do. So there are mistakes that we can afford to have the child make so that they can learn, they can stumble and fumble and hit the wall running and break their face a little bit. That's a mistake we can afford for them to do. We can't put them in a cage. And next time for advice, they'll come to you as the competent figure in the room. But if you allow the child to think that they are the competent figure in the room, there's total freedom and liberty. See what happens. Again, if you've worked with children or in therapy or adolescents who are in therapy who have a wide range of mental impairments, intellectual impairments. If you've worked with children, you understand that your words mean very little. What you say to them means very little, even if what you say quite literally predicts the future. If you keep doing that, you will end up hurting yourself. Doesn't work. Tell them 100 times. But the moment they actually do that and end up hurting themselves, they'll learn. There's great wisdom in this, right? When you understand behavior, there are some concessions the parent figure must make so that the child can learn on their own terms. And the parent struggles here with their own empathy and godliness because they have to allow the child to experience the pain of disappointment. The only language the deviant child speaks is pain. If you don't watch where you're going, you're going to fall and you're going to experience physical pain. 5 minutes later, they fall, they start crying, mommy, daddy, my legs, right? But the moment you disillusion the child with your degeneracy and with your regressive ways of raising, the moment you stop raising the child, get it? The moment you stop doing that, the child goes off the rails. Because the child in its form, and many of the races and many of the humans who are present on this planet Earth, they're basically children. They're new souls. So the new soul consumes itself. It is a vicious cycle of the ego worshiping itself as the ultimate form of everything. Like, what are the things that ego disallows us to do? Like, really think about that. Even in this sort of like indirect, sorry, in this sort of indirect relationship with the topic of race, the ego disallows you to admit that you were ever wrong. The ego disallows you to listen to the other. Ego disallows you to go beyond the depth at which you can conceptualize the world. And a child, in that sense, spiritual child and a physical child, or whatever, is the absolute representation of that effect. And whenever the ego shatters, it is always done through some sort of pain or trauma. When reality hits you in the fucking nuts, right? It's the because all other forms of communication have failed. When it hits you in the nuts and you experience the pain, right? That's when you get it. So when you look at Earth and you look at its inhabitants, its races, and you know the 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 makeup of the quality of the souls within each race, right? And you look at them as children, then you understand all of the processes that are going on in the world. Because what do children do? They run away from responsibilities. When they break something in the house, they'll say, "Oh, I didn't do it. I didn't do it." Because they don't have an understanding of virtue and the meaning and the value of truth and the idea of being truthful, right? As a self-serving thing. Not as some general, like the good manner thing, but as a self-serving thing. What does it do for me? It's for me to admit that it was in fact I, mother and father, who broke your $5,000 vase or vase or whatever it's called, right? Like, how is this self-serving? And the young soul doesn't understand this at all. But the moment you understand this is the moment you understand how to upgrade yourself and actually get to that next level, right? A lot of these conversations are unpopular. A lot of these conversations never happen in any family. Like, and a lot of these conversations, when they do happen, no one wants to hear it because it beckons them to think how they're fucking up their lives, right? But within the context of race, even most races do not want to hear about the things that they're lacking. And an interesting thing about children as well, if we look at everyone as spiritual children and infantile in the spiritual sense, which they are, most of humans, 80% plus. Um, Another interesting thing about children is they don't really lie. Like, children don't lie. Children just dream. And their way of communicating things to you is through the lie. So, for example, um, if you look at a conversation between two children, and there's one child who's talking to the other, and that one child is telling them, oh, like my father bought me such a nice, airplane toy or whatever, it's so cool, and like it flies, da, 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 right? The other kid will immediately tell them, really, that's so cool, my dad bought me this and this and that, my dad bought me this. Most of it probably a lie. Now, you look me in the eyes and you tell me, why is that child lying? Is that child lying because they felt jealousy? Is that child lying because they're a liar? Their imprint is that of a liar? No. But they wish for it to have happened. They wish for their father to have bought them a great gift. They wish for it to be true. They desire it. They dream for it. They dream about it. And it underlines a lack. And if you understand the depth of that, you understand just how heartbreaking something like that is, right? Then again, if we talk about the context of race and all of this, and if you look at people as spiritual infantile children, every race, whatever projections and lies they project upon their own race, is actually what they desire. It's their deepest, darkest dreams and desires of how they wish for things to be. But they're not, because they feel a lack. And now you take that on a personal level as well. You feel a lack. But back to physiognomy, okay? When you have the physiognomic traits, when you have criminal profiling with accuracy and efficacy above 90%, and you look at a specific race of people, and you can see on their physiognomies that they are highly impulsive, highly emotionally dysfunctional, highly neurotic, highly volatile. You can look and see that they're not conflict averse, they're conflict inviting. And you take a chunk of that people, the people of the desert, let's call them, right? And you put them into a first world society, and they start looting and pillaging and raping people, and you act all surprised. Oh, we don't know why this is happening. You hate this world. You hate this world. When I talk to someone with these traits, right, who has these traits, I talk to them differently than I would with someone else who doesn't have those traits, someone who's facilitating, conflict averse, open minded, still respectable and authoritative and stoic to a certain degree, but someone who has a good idea of diplomatic relations. I talk to them differently. And then whenever I see someone who has a degenerate mind and no morals and no moral values and no spiritual values, and I'm not pointing fingers at any particular race, by the way. This could be any person of any race, but they must have the physiognomic features to support my judgments here that I'm casting, right? So when I talk to someone who's more facilitating and inviting, of course I will talk to them in a different way. When I talk to someone who I know that they only speak through the ideals and notions and sentiments of physical force or any sort of force, of course I will speak to them in a different manner. That's not judgmental, it's just observant. Now, if you see yourself as an observant person, let's say you study the art of physiognomy for the sake of being observant, not judgmental. Judgment is just part of the formulaic assumption of the expected behaviors and temperaments of the other. So if you're someone who understands it to a generalized degree, um, you would be a hypocrite to say that you don't actually model your behavior and your way of communication according to what you see in the person you're with. If I got stuck in an elevator with a person who is very creepy, right? Who I see as they're untrustworthy, right? I'd have trouble falling asleep in that elevator. I would, because there would be an inner conflict that my intuition would spawn within me, saying that, like, what's keeping this person from just waking up one day, like, just killing me and robbing me, and then blaming it on something else. But if I'm stuck in an elevator with someone who is incredibly feminine and sensitive, and someone who has a conflict averse face, right? Someone who embodies the ideal of communication and grace and so on, I'll feel safe as hell. And the chances of something like that occurring are so incredibly low that they're basically non-existent, because the only sort of like the unsure factor of that is, well, if they go beyond their physiognomy to such degree that they forsake all, all of their all of their imprints that are found on their face. So you have to be, in a sense, when it comes to the practice of physiognomy, you have to be, in a sort of sense, incredibly judgmental. But before you allow yourself to be judgmental, you have to become incredibly proficient at the art, because you don't want to be judgmental in a wrongful sense, right? You don't want to cast the wrong judgment on the person, right? Because now you're disillusioning yourself. So you have to become incredibly proficient at the art, and then you can cast your judgment. And if that judgment means, for example, if that judgment tells me that most people from a particular area of the world tend to behave a certain way, right? I will live by that judgment. Of course I will. So if you look at the physiognomy of gypsies and the the cultural sentiments that exist within societies of gypsies, and if you link those generalizations to the generalizations of their physiognomic expressions, right? And whoever then shares those same physiognomic archetypal expressions around the world, if you link it to that and say, I don't trust you near me, you might steal from me. You might. So the cultural significance of the whatever you're experiencing as a cultural thing, that cultural lifestyle and living style actually changes the physiognomic makeup of the people partaking in that culture. So if I'm from a 500 or 1,000-year-old culture of looting and pillaging and stealing, right? Of forgery, of all kinds of mercantile deals, right? It changes my physiognomy. So the imprint affects the cultural context, and the cultural context affects the imprint. That's how it works. It's a double sided, it's a twin sided mirror. But again, before you cast the judgment, you have to first become extremely prolific at the art, because then you risk making a mistake. And most of these mistakes that you make won't be too costly, but some of them might. So, for example, um, people will say, "Oh, he has an untrustworthy face," right? Like, look at his hair, look at his nose. The nose is a big thing, right? Look at his nose, look at this, look at that. Now, the nose is an incredibly complex feature of the face. It can tell you a lot about a person, but you need to have incredible accuracy in reading it to really understand what's going on there. But if you're a degenerate practitioner, which most people are, unfortunately, right? The moment you see a nose that is shaped a little bit, in a different way, or sort of like, I don't know, like a Roman nose or whatever, you'll cast the wrong judgment. So you cast the judgment, oh, he must be a Jewish merchant or something like that. You need to have a good understanding of detail first to allow yourself to cast these sorts of judgments, right? Because if you can't distinguish, let's say, a Roman nose, right, and the nose of a Semite, and then the nose of I don't know, like something from someone from the hills of Italy, or the Netherlands, and so if you can't distinguish these things, you're basically just casting this weird judgment that's basically wrong. But if you cast the correct judgment, great. 95+% of the times you will be correct in your assessment. Again, it has to be it's almost incredibly rare. The only faces that are truly difficult to read are those that carry hybridized archetypes and hybridized archetypal energies. And even that is a sign of someone who's like an old soul, right? Like someone who's been through this trip a few times, you know, and someone who they know what they're doing in a sense, right? They're like conscious and aware. One second, I got to take a sip of this drink. But to finish it off, what physiognomy teaches us about race is that we're not being judgmental enough. By far. By far. Cast your fucking judgment. Don't be afraid of it. Live by it. That's why it exists. That's why people have faces, to show you exactly what they are, to show you where they're going, what their imprint is, what their intentions are, what their temperament is like, how willing they are to engage in physical violence and contact, how diplomatic they can be, how artistic they can be, how intuitive they can be, how instinct based they can be, how impulsive or non impulsive they can be, how radicalized they can be, how stoic they can be, how non stoic they can be, how flowy and fun and spontaneous they can be, or how rigid and methodical and calculated and technical they can be. They're showing you all of these things. Every person ever who walks around with a face is showing you exactly what they do and who they are, what their deficiencies are, what their proficiencies are, where they're trying to go, what they're trying to do with their lives. Are they lonely and they're not lonely, right? Do they take care of their health? Do they not take care of their health? Are they more temperamental or less temperamental? If you look at them as, let's say, a map of these things, right? If you look at a person and you're trying to find a person with whom you wish to talk with an open heart, right? Just let your emotions go and let your emotions through. You first have to find a person who's even capable of transmuting those emotions, who is capable of mimicking those emotions to incite any sort of empathy within them. What's the point of opening the depths of your hearts to someone who is not even capable of understanding those depths? So you have to really pick and choose the reason I want to share physiognomy, let's say, in face reading with not the world, but with the people that I respect and love and they love and respect. But the reason I want to share is because I want to tell you that you're not being judgmental enough, right? Like, I want you to understand that you can pick and choose your experiences. You can actively do that on a daily basis. Now, I'm not saying go out there and start reading the face of every person you encounter on the street, but I'm saying you can pick who you want to work with. You can pick and choose who you want to be associated with or not associated with. You can pick and choose your partners. You can pick and choose your companions according, yes, to preconceived notions and judgments that we cast on people according to their racial imprint, to their facial imprint, to their genetic imprint, their temperamental canvas of the face, that sort of imprint. Um, and you need to be brutal with it, right? Because I'll tell you a secret. I'll tell you a secret. There's no such thing as an ugly imprint. There's no such thing as an ugly human being. It doesn't exist. You could be objective, like asymmetrical and quote unquote ugly, where you could have like a crooked nose and you could have like, I don't know, like asymmetrical teeth, and your one lip could be much larger than the other. But if you still have a pure soul and pure intention, right? You will still exude great energy, right? You will still exude great energy. So there's no such thing as like a bad imprint. So, for example, this is why I teach to go the opposite. When you have a strong imprint, go opposite of the imprint. If someone comes to me, and let's say like an African man comes to me and they have a highly impulsive physiognomy, what do I tell them? I tell them, my friend, this is the base expectation that your imprint has put on you. Now it's your job to transmute this base expectation and turn it into charisma, turn it into attraction. So when I see them, I'm like, the first thought that comes to my head, wow, you're probably like super spontaneous. You probably don't like focusing on a single thing for an extended period of time. You know this to be true. And they'll say, well, yeah, yeah, it's true. Well, then I'll say, if someone had those traits and if it was someone that you love, what advice would you give them? What are the deficiencies that they would naturally have in their life because of these traits? And he would say, well, they probably wouldn't read a lot because they have problems like focusing for extended periods of time. They would underestimate the value of reading. They would underestimate the value of watching a movie from start to finish, to give yourself that closure of that analytical sort of like conclusion, right? To learn the lesson of the movie, right? They would have troubles with that. They would have troubles with emotional regulation, with behavioral regulation. They'd have troubles with these things, right? And then I asked them, well, what kind of advice would you give to this person? They would say, well, I would tell them to read. I would tell them to read a lot more. I would tell them to practice in an aware and conscious state when they're being impulsive in their actions, where they're talking before they speak, when they're talking before they think, right? Like I did just now, which is so funny. Yeah, life's ironic. But when they're doing all of these things, you give them the cheat code. And the cheat code is, don't go against your nature, because all of these parts, like let's say you're highly impulsive, it also means that you're highly spontaneous. People will love this about you, right? This is a good thing. Wow, he can be such a spontaneous person or presence. And he can be a lot of fun. He can be entertaining. But if spontaneous and impulsive is all that you are, then it's not charismatic anymore. Then it's just annoying. It's irritating. Like, can you sit down and have a decent conversation? Right? Please. Can you, like, please just sit down for 5 minutes and not jump from one topic to the other? And you have to teach yourself that. And when you encompass the things that you lack, or when you start to encompass the things that you lack, and this is the importance of knowing your racial imprint, the knowing the deficiencies of your race, right? When you start to encompass those things, you become incredibly attractive. You become incredibly charismatic because our expectation of you as outside observers is that, wow, this is someone who's probably, you know, who invites conflict all the time, who's very disagreeable, who's very impulsive and can't control themselves. And then you have this person who has this physiognomic traits, and they're so calm and so collected and so gentle in how they talk to other people and how they interface with other people in the larger world, right? And you're like, wow, like this person has done so much inner work. I have to respect them. I have to respect that. I have to respect how much they're proving me wrong. And the moment you start doing that, right, is the moment what we call the deviation layer of your physiognomy changes, right? The moment you do that, your physiognomy changes. Your imprint stays the same. Like, I'm not telling you that like your bones are going to reform themselves according to your, like, the whims of your mind. Even though through practice and training that has been proven to be done, but not in the facial structure as much. But the musculature and the nervous system and the water retention and all of the more, how to say, liquid and fluffy portions of your face, they will realign themselves in accordance to the interchange that you've made. And your best self, like your most attractive self, that's where it's hiding. You understand? Like, if someone has like a frail face, or a cowardly face, right? The more they um become impressive in a strength or boldness or bravery sense, the more attractive they become. And let's say if I'm a part of a race that has this deficiency, yes, a deficiency, races have deficiencies. Boo hoo, cry us a river about it. Every race has a deficiency. And then all of the other races exist for you to finally understand that you have a deficiency. If you're from a race that has a spiritual deficiency, right? The more you embody spiritual living, the more charismatic and happy and attractive you become. It's so simple. When you hear it said in this manner, it's so simple, right? But it's not what you're taught in school. Well, you're taught in school, and all these people, what they're taught in school is like, well, how to count to 10, because how to use a calculator, because you'll need that when you're counting your boss's money in the 9 to 5 office job that we've prepared for you, Billy. Oh, and you'll have to compete for that job as well, by the way. You'll pay for your education, you'll go through your education, you'll be called an expert, but you'll still have to prove yourself when you get to the desk. How the fuck does that make sense? Imagine if I put through 7 or 8 years of education. 7 and 8 fucking years. You're supposed to be an expert, a master of your field. And then you have to go and do a stupid fucking test to get hired. Am I a fucking expert or not? If I went through 7 or 8 years, why is a degree necessary? That I have a degree, it says expert of field. Why do I need an interview? So when you look at the world, when you start looking at the world at just how fucking degenerate it is, I'm sorry. Okay? I'm not talking about the world as in the grandiose blissful existence in intimacy with nature that we have been blessed to have been provided with. I'm talking about the human world, the man made world that masquerades as something so grandiose. Oh, we've built this civilization. What the fuck have you built? You don't even understand what a degree is. You don't even understand what a deficiency is. You don't even understand who you are. You don't even know where you are. So when you start thinking about it like this, you understand just how underwhelming the world is in terms of just how much everyone, every race, every nation, every culture has no clue what they're doing. And this whole charade of disgusting political dick riding power play that we're seeing unfold now all across the globe is just a childish soul's desperate infantile attempt to hide his own incompetence. If you can't be honest with yourself about your imprint, be it a racial imprint, be it a genetic imprint, and so on and so forth, if you can't be honest with yourself about these things existing, then you can never understand why they exist. Why was I born with this deficiency? Why was I born with this challenge? Because that's where your work is. That's what you were born in the first place. If you and I were perfect beings, we wouldn't be born in this world. Definitely. We'd be born into a world that at least know what a degree is, right? You wouldn't be born into a stupid world, right? If you weren't stupid yourself. We're all stupid. We're all so stupid, but we're all stupid about specific things. And if only we could bring ourselves to the point where we're a little bit less stupid, not even smart, not even neutral, a little bit less stupid, where our work is, you're already doing more than most of the populace of the earth, right? Because what most of the populace is engaged in is tribal, cultural, national, and race-based escapism. It's what a child does, right? The child like runs away from. So funny even talking about it. The child runs away from the the responsibility for the stupid things they've done, right? Like, you know, hey Betsy, did you eat all the chocolates? Right? And my face is covered in chocolate. And they, no, I didn't. Right? Like, and that's it. All of the pain and suffering of the human race as we know it nowadays, the moment you get overwhelmed by it, all of this pain and suffering that you see today in Russia, in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Israel, in Africa, wherever, is in one way or another a direct or indirect result of this incredulous stupidity, like immeasurable ignorance and stupidity of the human race. If you could gift a person the greatest gift they can ever receive, you would gift them a mirror each and every time. Each and every time. So they can actually look into it and see, like, wait a second, like, huh, maybe it's not everyone else that's, blah, blah. Maybe I'm not a perfect either. Maybe there's something wrong with me too. Hey, maybe if I fix this side of me, people will start to like me more. I'll get more girlfriends and boyfriends. I'll get more respect. I'll be more charismatic. Maybe if I make this little change according to my racial imprint, right? And my racial imprint says I'm highly volatile and dysfunctional. Or let's say, okay, let's not talk about blacks indirectly because everyone knows I'm shitting on blacks now. Let's talk about whites. If my racial imprint is that I can be overly greedy and I can be overly to a suicidal degree, I could be empathetic. I could be vain. If my imprint says that, I can be, this and that, I can have these like terrible traits. Can I go and fix it? Please? Can you grow beyond escaping that? Can you achieve a state of self-respect, like the base minimum of self-respect, where you can say that I am not a perfect being, I actually need to fix some things? If you look at the average Asian, right? And you see that they're so materialist that their average work-life balance doesn't exist. Their work-life balance is like their work balance. They don't have a life. It's all about work and achievement. And their face is rigid as fuck. It's so rigid. All of them look the same because there's such level and degree of uniformity with these societies, right? That you're punished for not conforming. So when your racial imprint says you need more individuation, have a fucking opinion of your own. Go and create something daring and bold and new and yada yada yada. Your physiognomy will change. Go and do it. And this simple truth is why people are willing to come out and say, "Oh, this is so judgmental. It's so racist." Duh, duh, duh." You will no longer be allowed to run away from your responsibilities, young man. That's what the world's really teaching you. That's what this new age is teaching us. That all of these things that you were successful in running away from because you were a baby in first grade, now you're in sixth grade and you won't be able to do it any longer. You're not allowed to do it any longer. Remember what we talked about parenting? You allow the child to, like walk into a wall a few times, but there are some things that the child is not allowed. The child is not allowed to play with a gun because the moment they make the mistake, and you know that they will, right? They're going to blow their brains out. You're at fault. But the child can be allowed to run around and fall down from time to time and feel the pain of their own mistakes. Yes. But yeah, look, let's finish it off with this, right? Like, understand the simple truth of race and judgment. If I look at someone, they're part of a race that's known for being disingenuous, I'm not going to trust them. I'm sorry. There's nothing you can tell me. There's no level or degree of shaming me or whatever that's going to make me act differently unless their physiognomy shows me different, right? If I know someone's from a race that's more conflict averse, right? That's more virtuous in a sense, right? I'm going to interface with them differently, and that is fine. They want to take that away from you, get it? They want to take away from you what your intuition already knows. And they want to program you with the opposite and tell you, oh, like there's no difference at all. And everyone's just a blank canvas. And all of this mushy skin thing and the musculature and the grand, divine, godly fucking design of the universe in which everything collectively is modeled according to the same archetypal principle as above so below. All of this is by chance, some strange gambler's chance that you have this type of face and not that type of face, right? That you're this tall or not that tall. It's some mysterious woo woo idea that scientists don't know anything about except for the things that they want to know and the grants that they get, right? Like it's so fucking ridiculous. They're like 150 years in the past, where you have the intuitive eye. You can just look at a person and be like, oh, okay, he's a fucking piece of shit. This guy's a liar. That guy's a fucking freak. He's a creep. He's like this. Is like, oh look, that's a good friend. That person probably is a good friend. I can be friends with them. They look loyal. They look virtuous. They look very like adaptable. This guy's a lot of fun. That girl is very sophisticated, probably intellectual, right? That guy's a great manager. He's a good administrator. The moment you give the degenerate the benefit of the doubt is the moment you cuck yourself. Pick and choose who you interact with, who you talk to, but first get good on at least the journeyman level of real physiognomy. Okay? And I know that's a big ask, but since we're all here and since sort of like the topic and the theme and of whatever like we're going through is physiognomy and face reading, right? When you've achieved a sort of like a journeyman level, you are free to go and pick and choose your experiences. I detail this in in The Art of Quiet Living, the book that I'm writing. I detail this in excruciating meticulous detail, the benefits of this. And this isn't done for you to somehow avoid life or run away from like the people you need to meet, regardless of their physiognomy or whatever they have, you'll meet them regardless. Those are unavoidable happenstances. Get it? Like you meet them regardless. But there are moments in life when you can practice your agency, when you can choose, right? So like as you like between your lessons, you can choose where you want to take your break, right? So you can choose. And if I don't want to choose the experience of interfacing with people that I don't like. I don't want to give them my attention, my focus, my energy, my reality creating quantum shifting juices. I don't want to give it to them, right? So you avoid, it's not even avoid, right? You just starve the thing that you don't like of attention, right? It's up to me to give attention to whatever I want to give attention to. If I see a beautiful person, right, sitting at the park, I'll go talk to them, right? And if I see someone who's unhygienic and in a terrible mood, right? And they have this, like written all over their face, I'm not going to go talk to them, right? Oh, maybe they're a nice person. Most likely they're not. And even if they were a nice person, they're not really feeling like a nice person right now. So, in truth, the art of physiognomy is the art of becoming very picky and choosy, which is a good thing. Believe me, there's nothing wrong with picking and choosing, right? When you look at a tree and that tree bears many types of many fruit, which one do you pick? You always pick the one that looks the tastiest and the nicest to you, right? That's the one you pick. You'll understand, well, okay, like which of the fruit is closest to me, right? And then you'll pick the one that you find the most beautiful. And that's what you can do at a constant rate, and you don't have to guilt trip yourself. You don't have to shame yourself into think that you're doing something wrong, that you're being judgmental and da da da. All you're doing is you're looking at the world, you're seeing the beauty, and you're picking the beauty that you love and like. Don't let race get in the way of that. Don't get any sort of, I don't know, like physiognomic trait get in the way of that. Don't let anything get in the way of that, right? Racism is such a funny thing. It's such a funny thing where it doesn't even exist. The only thing that exists is what you wear on the fucking face, right? And what it can tell us about you. And if it's not telling us good things, then that's your problem to fix, right? You should go and maybe do something about it, right? And the moment you do something about it, everyone loves you, right? All right, enough of this. This rant has gone on for long enough. But good talk, good talk. I want to do more spaces about physiognomy. I really, really do. And yeah, I'll do a little thread later on. Like, you guys can give me any questions or the stuff about physiognomy. You'd be interested to talk about. It's my favorite art and has been for the longest time, for sure. And it's given me so much value. It's a personal art, of course, but the more you learn it and the better you get at it, it helps you so much just to traverse the world, right? Traverse the world, allow yourself to actually really see people for what they are, and like free yourself from these weirdo programmings, right? These weirdo programs that are telling you like, oh, like don't think this way and think that way. Don't tell me how to think, right? Don't tell me how to think. You're just as much confused and you're just as much human as I am. We have an equal starting line and an equal finish line. So let's not pretend that there are some people out there somewhere, in high places that actually know what's going on any more than any of us do, because they don't, most likely. Probably not. So yeah, don't tell me how to think. Show me who you really are instead.